You're listening to the Banríon Show. It's 8 in the evening. Tune in every night at 8 to listen to the Banríon Show on Irish News Radio or ITV.ie. And you can contact anything that you've heard or if anything you'd like to discuss at news@irishnews.net. Hello, you're listening to Banríon Show on Irish News Radio and ITV.ie. We're here talking to Paul Golding. And we're going to catch up with him about what he's been doing since the last time we've been talking to him. So, Paul, what have you been up to? You've been in Belfast, and let's catch up with what you've been doing.
Good afternoon, and good afternoon to all your listeners. It's a pleasure to be on the show again.
Thank you for coming on.
We've been very, very active all over the United Kingdom, especially in Northern Ireland. We've held days of action, and I think since the last time I came on the show in Lisbon, Portrush, and various other places, Bangor in North Down. So we're very, very active across Northern Ireland, and our support's growing. We're holding a meeting this Saturday in Ballymena for the public and our supporters to come along to and to hear talks about the problems in the town. And recently we uploaded a video. We were invited to Ballymena to meet with some of the locals who were up in arms about the levels of immigration. And as I was driving around, I was pretty shocked myself to see how the authorities had just chosen this one small town in Northern Ireland to house and rehome, what could be thousands and thousands of these Romanian and Bulgarian gypsies in the town, and the locals are up in arms. The local politicians don't give a damn. So we went there, we were shocked, we uploaded a video and it got roughly about 500,000 views. Wow. And it's the talk of the whole of Northern Ireland for a few days. Britain First has appeared in the Belfast Telegraph, Belfast Live, the Irish News and so on. We also, because we're registered now in Northern Ireland, we are using the system in Northern Ireland to sue Facebook, which has now begun, for political discrimination. So yeah, it's been a very, very busy period since the last time I appeared on the show.
Well done, fantastic. Why do you think, the left just seems to be getting more ignorant and more hateful towards people trying to protect their own people? I don't know whether you saw Bono and his disgusting behaviour. He went on with a devil-like mask, and he literally Nazi saluted the Prime Minister of Hungary, and he insulted the Danes and insulted the Swedes. Just horrific stuff. They're really getting more angry. The left is just insane, and they just persecute the whole time. So what do you feel, or what do you feel that this is going to, do you think that they're on a rage? It just seems the world were both split in half of people who feel one way and the other people, and it just seems like it's getting further and further apart. How do you feel? Why do you think this is going to last?
I think there's a simple explanation for all of this, and I've seen it, and it's purely because the political left, the left wing of politics, is losing the argument. And you can look at things like the emergence of Donald Trump, Brexit, and the rise of populist movements on the continent. The left is losing the argument everywhere, and they can sense that they're losing the argument and that they're conceding ground, and they're reacting like the spoiled, childish brats that they are.
Completely.
They're acting badly.
Absolutely. So you were put in prison in Ireland, in the Northern Ireland, in the 6th, or were you sent back to the, as you like to call the mainland? The Irish will kill me for saying that word, but what you like to the UK. So where were you sent back there, or did you spend time in Northern Irish prisons?
No, the upcoming trial had to be postponed because we had to switch legal representation. We've got a new legal team now, a new barrister, and because of that, the trial for me and Jada Franson has been postponed for quite a while, giving us a breathing space. But we've got that coming up over the next few months. At some point, we will be on trial in Laganside Court in Belfast, and the establishment will be seeking to send us to prison. But I have been to prison several times over in England for confronting radical extremist Muslims. So So, this is the thing. If you stand up for any of our countries, if you put your head above the parapet, then you will face the politically correct demonisation and persecution of the state. And we have to take that in our stride, and we have to be strong, and we have to build our movement regardless of how many times we're arrested or slapped with injunctions or restrictions or put in prison. They're literally throwing everything they possibly can at us. But if we falter in one moment in our duty, then it's our children that will suffer. So we're going to keep going. We're never going to surrender.
Absolutely, excellent. And would you think about putting other faces up? Because they can't, if the more people you put up online, then they can't put everybody in prison. But because there's a certain amount of people like yourself who's in the forefront, they keep attacking you because you're easy target, like Tommy Robinson and people who Pekita and all that. They completely just go after those. What do you think about that, or moving it so that it's not as easy as a target?
Yeah, it's just the way politics works, isn't it? People identify, when you're talking about a political party, a movement or organisation, people identify that with the leader of the time. So there's not much really we can do about that. We do have our activists and regional officials and our elections officer and that on videos on a regular basis, but the establishment is not stupid. Whether it's in the Republic or in the United Kingdom, the establishment is not stupid, and they know that if they can knock me or Jada or anyone else out of the frame, then the movements that we power along will fall as well. So they focus all of their ammunition onto people like myself and Jada Franson.
With us, it's easier. They have, at least in the UK, you have certain people speaking out. There isn't anybody for us, but that's better. What do you think about Sweden? Did you see what happened with the Sweden votes and the Danish banning the burqa? What do you think of that? It's definitely, there is a feeling that people are beginning to fight back.
That's it, and that's why the left is reacting with such outrage and dirty tricks and persecution, is because they know that they're losing. And if you extend the timeline out long enough, they know they're going to lose, and they're going to lose big. People are getting fed up with left-wing policies such as immigration, multiculturalism, treating the natives or the local people, whether it's in the Republic or the UK, as second-class citizens, and doing everything they possibly can to destroy our sense of nationhood and traditions and national identity. And they know that the people are fed up of this process of transforming our countries from what they have been since the dawn of time into something that the people do not want. And they can see with things like Brexit and the emergence of UKIP. UKIP got 4 million votes in England. And they can see it with with Brexit and Donald Trump, that they are losing the argument. And
it's shocking. I'm glad that they're losing the argument, but I do see, I'm not sure where this is going to. I do think it's going to end in war, civil war of some sort, because there's such a divide. And I do think Europe is heading for war. It's just what country. It'll either be Ireland, unfortunately, or it'll be Turkey that'll invade Europe. That is just the way I can see it happening. And
Turkey's invading Europe already. 10% of Germany is of Turkish origin, so they're already very slyly and deliberately allowing migrant streams into Europe to spread Islam. It's quite interesting that none of the rich Gulf states took any refugees, and some of them were on record as saying we turned the refugees the other way towards Europe so they could spread Islam. When Germany asked Saudi Arabia for assistance with some of the, with the hundreds of thousands of Muslim migrants in Germany, Saudi Arabia replied that they only offered to construct and fund 200 mosques, and this is just the way Europe's going at the moment.
What would your idea be? Would it be to ban Islam? Where do you see, what? Because, I think it's a bigger problem. I think Islam is a huge part of it, but I think it's just the whole left ideology of breaking, nationality down, breaking the indigenous race down.
Yes. Yeah.
So where do you see, I think even with Islam, even if we could tackle that problem, but I think it's the left that really needs to be tackled, because we don't tackle the left.
if you look at the problem we've got is that people who are left wing in orientation are blind to the truth. They're blinkered. You had the 20th century where you had socialism and communism tried in every possible permutation and format imaginable, and every single last one of them failed, and 110 million people have perished throughout the 20th century at the hands of communists and socialists all over the world. Mass murder, genocide, repression. Socialism was tried in every way imaginable, and it failed miserably everywhere it got a foothold. Despite that record of colossal apocalyptic failure, you still have people describing themselves as liberals and socialists and communists in the Western world, in the media, in politics, and it's just bizarre. So left-wing people will never give up on their pet ideological fetishes. They will drag Europe, the West, North America into the gutter, into the abyss of civil war and civil strife and bloodshed, carnage, chaos. They will drag us to the bitter end until we remove them from power. They will carry on with their left-wing schemes and their left-wing projects until Europe is utterly destroyed. And even then they won't admit they're wrong.
Crazy. It just seems to have come in the last few years. I mean, talking to crazy people, particularly in Ireland, and, trying to explain to them Irish is an ethnicity, not a nationality. I mean, you can't just, because there's so many Indians and Africans, but they get an Irish passport because the Irish government is giving them out like sweets. And it's it's just because you breathe the air does not mean that your DNA changes, that your culture, your heritage, changes. Your ethnicity does not change. And they can't seem to get that. It's ridiculous. I'm having to refer to myself as native Irish or native, native Irish or indigenous Irish, which is crazy. But I really do see the problem. Islam obviously is a problem, but for me, I see the left as the main problem in Ireland. I think the Muslims will run when trouble hits the fan in this country anyway. It'll be...
Absolutely. And the left, the political left, on the main, in the UK, as well as in the Republic, that is the main problem. They're the ones who are ruining our countries. They're the ones who are selling out our peoples. And they're the ones who are doing all the damage. Radical Islam is on the rise, and that's going to be the main problem in the future. When it grows strong enough and it becomes bullish enough, that's going to be the main problem. But never forget that it was the political left, all of the essentially the white, indigenous, treacherous politicians and journalists who fought tooth and nail for decades to get millions of foreigners over into our countries, into our homelands. They're the ones responsible. And I'm absolutely 100% sure that one day, whether it's in the UK or in the Republic, all of the traitors, all of the left-wing, treacherous politicians and journalists will be punished for the damage and the crimes they've carried out against our native peoples of these islands.
I absolutely hope so, because I think they're totally, for me, I can't stand Islam. I think it's a disgusting ideology, and I don't think it should be allowed in the West for human rights alone. But I don't think that's really our problem. I think it's the left who allowed it and built it, and who shut everyone down for trying to speak the truth. It's them who needs to be stopped and controlled. All the EU, the Soros EU, and all the particularly in Ireland, government and the media. I think in other countries you may have a little bit more balance, but Ireland, I think, is so corrupt, people are voting doesn't count. So it needs to be all just taken down and started again. It's frightening, actually, but in one way, I think people are waking up here, but they are seeing it's left and right, which we never had that issue before. It's insane, but it's all over the world. What do you think? Northern Ireland, you say is having its own issues, but I thought Northern Ireland would have been quite safe because obviously that's run by the UK government and quite different from ours. So I didn't think that they were bringing them so much into Northern Ireland. That's not the Republican government, that's the UK government, I presume, that's bringing them in.
It's hard to say who's actually responsible for bringing them in, but the problem we have in Northern Ireland is that on the Irish Catholic side of the peace walls, it's very, very dominated by Sinn Féin and the Provisional IRA, which means that any kind of Irish Catholic support for Britain First is kind of like behind the scenes and under the radar. But we have got, I mean, just looking through our database, we've got I would probably say anywhere up to a third, a third of our entire support base in Northern Ireland is Irish Catholic. But they face terrible problems being open in that support because of the politics, the legacy up here. But the establishment are deliberately trying to just drip in waves of immigration into Northern Ireland, just bit by bit by bit, try to introduce them to it and then get them used to it, and then they'll adjust to it. Sooner or later, you'll have big problems like we have in England, like we have in Dublin, Dundalk, etc. And sometimes I used to travel down to Dundalk to post out letters to some of our Irish supporters. It was a lot cheaper if we crossed over into Dundalk and posted from there, because obviously in Northern Ireland it's international shipping. So I would travel down from Belfast and go, many towns on the way, Portadown, Market Hill, so on. And these were completely populated by either, British people or Irish people. And as soon as you cross over the border into the Republic and you pull into the first town, Dundalk, it's filled with Africans. And I just couldn't get my head around that. So that's what they're trying to bring to Northern Ireland now. And that's why Britain First is needed so desperately in Northern Ireland at this point on the timeline.
Yeah, they have destroyed so many towns. The left, like, since Leo's been in it, he doesn't even have a mandate. It started with the puppet Kenny, and now the rent boy, Leo, as I call him. It's total destruction of Ireland. And it's frightening how quickly it's happening. And he's staying in power even though he's not have a mandate. But I really just see the problem is the left, and until the whole government, there is very little we can do about fighting Islam, because I mean obviously the left aren't stupid. They know what they're doing is disgusting, and I do believe a lot of the left are paedophiles. They want this brought in, and I think there's an element of sickness with the left that they want this brought on. There is an element who are just ignorant and stupid, but the majority of them have their own.
I can never understand with the likes of the SDLP, especially Sinn Féin, how you could sacrifice so much over 30 years of troubles to get the British government out of Ireland, and then your end goal is to turn Ireland into part of Africa ruled by unelected bureaucrats in Brussels. It's just mind-boggling to me.
Absolutely.
I don't understand
Loopy Lou is just for the fucking birds anyway. I mean, Sinn Féin had, when Jerry Adams, some sort of credibility, at least they were different, but Loopy Lou has turned Sinn Féin into a laughing stock. It is no different than Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael. It's just more of a joke policy. That's the only difference between it. But they're all the same party. There is absolutely no point in voting for any of them. They're all literally one party. It's a joke. And it's complete destruction of Ireland. And she actually says she's not a nationalist party anymore. Like the IRA and the Republic became for national ideas. That's what it was all about, becoming an independent sovereign country. And she says, the Sinn Féin saying, no, that's not what they're about now.
Well, now
they're
turning around, they want to throw it all away. I don't understand.
Well, that's what she said. She denies that any of that was like kind of now she kind of comes out with they're socialists. They're not for the Republic. They're not for independence. They're not for sovereignty. They're actually unionists is what they are, but they're just not unions for the UK. They're a huge unionist party, but it's for the EU sorrows, and that's who they're paid by.
Yes.
They're the biggest unionist party actually on the island, other than Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. They're all paid.
I don't understand where they're coming from. If they're so resolute in their determination to get the British and the British government out of Ireland, then why are they?
It's such a ridiculous. It doesn't even make any sense. It's just like get the Brits out and bring everybody else in.
It's a contradictory position. It just doesn't make any sense. It's backwards. Yeah.
Absolutely no. Haven't made sense in the last 10, 15 years. Not that the policies was brilliant beforehand, but at least it was different. But now they're socialists. They absolutely are complete leftists, nuts. The same with the rest leftist nuts in the Dáil. Unfortunately, they're all the same. And she's just completely loopy. Like I think she would just rather have immigrants living in Ireland than native Irish, which is crazy considering where
Exactly.
Sinn Féin
It is
came
a
from.
form of mental illness. It's a form of mental illness. You can never imagine, for example, the Japanese people all of a sudden wanting to replace themselves with waves and waves of immigration, and the native Japanese become a minority in their capital city, Tokyo. It just never happened because they're not
Their
polluted
brain in
with
the
this
head.
left-wing socialist and liberal ideology. It's just, it is a poisonous disease that's invaded the heads of everyone in the UK and everyone in Ireland and everyone in Europe, and that's the main. Until we can overcome that and replace it with a more healthy, decent,
And go,
traditional mindset, then our countries are going to end up as squalid third world dumps, infested with real bad communal problems, and it's going to head for civil war. I'm pretty sure of it.
absolutely. Well, I actually, at this stage, I think myself and a lot of other people who have had enough of the left wing. I can't wait for the Civil War to break out because I've absolutely had enough. We don't matter what we vote for. It doesn't matter what we think. It's all rigged. It makes no difference. We need to just
No, of
take it
course.
down. There is absolutely no point in continuing on the way we are because our voice will never be heard when the media is all run by the left wing, our government's all run by the left wing. Everything that we do is wrong. There is no point other than collapse the government as we know it. And that is the danger. But, but I think, things are looking up anyway, which is a positive thing. I do think other European countries are waking up. Unfortunately, Ireland just seems more leftist. But England does seem to be kind of waking up. How do you feel that? Have you moved on since the last, like the vote since the Brexit? Do you believe that would happen again, or?
Absolutely, I think slowly but surely things are turning around. Like I say, UKIP got 4 million votes, and then we had Brexit, we had the the EU referendum, and things are just turning that way. They're just slowly but surely, people are starting to come out of their shell, and they're fed up, and they're completely disconnected from modern politics, and everyone hates politicians, everyone hates journalists now, and Trump's accelerating the process by slamming the fake news media and slamming the establishment, and it's just everything is starting to become acceptable and mainstream and normal, whereas it wasn't 20 years ago. And I think that process is just going to carry on, and we are going to be on the rise. We are going to be on the rise, and I would more than happily work with Irish patriots, Irish patriot groups, organisations in the Republic, and
Fantastic.
share with them our skill sets and our campaigning tactics that we've developed over in the UK to get to where we are now. I mean, I started Britain First, launched it in 2011 in East Belfast, and we started off with just 3 people, and now we number millions around the world. And it would be great to see something along the same lines as Britain First emerge down in the Republic, whether it's Ireland First or some other organisation. I cannot wait for the day that happens.
Yeah, no, and I actually believe that day is happening because I think there's enough of us now who are willing to stand up and take the bullet for the country because we've had enough. We can't take it anymore. We've just had enough of them taking over everything. We can't even trust them with our votes. So, but Paul, it's been great to talk to you again. And we'll keep in touch, and I'll let you know what's happening down here, and we'll try and get together on one of your meetings. I'm going to try and get up and maybe bring some people up, and we're going to try and get together. It'll be good. Thank
Absolutely.
you so
I look
much for
forward
you.
to it. God bless the United Kingdom.
God
God bless the Republic of Ireland.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you very much for the interview.
Hello?
Hello, you're listening to the Banríon Show on Irish News Radio. I'm talking to Paul Rimmen, who's quite well known in the UK for speaking out about Islam. So, Paul, I wanted to ask you a few questions about Islam.
Yeah.
How did you get involved, and what do you see the dangers it is for your country?
Wow, how did I get involved? Well, I think when mass immigration started to really hit home after 1997, when Tony Blair was elected, and I just realised he'd opened the floodgates, and that gave Islam the opportunity to colonise Britain, and it began to move in a massive way, and the area that I live in was Islamised. And I'd always explored Islam, I'd always had an interest in it, and I realised way back in the 1980s that because they had such a high birth rate and that Western Europe was becoming very sterile, they were going to have a very youthful, growing, dynamic population, and we were going to have an aging, stagnant population, and they were going to move into our area and replace us if we didn't wake up. So I saw the danger, and I realised Islam's a very expansionist faith. It seeks always to take territory. I mean, that's the drive within Islam. That's the order that Muhammad gave them, to go forth and take territory and conquer the world. So it's highly motivated to come into our countries and take over. So there was a danger there. And I tried to wake people up and make them realise what was happening, but it's always been a very difficult task.
Still is.
Until
I mean,
now.
yeah. Oh, Tamara, do you see a change in it? Because it's kind of newish here in this country. But I mean, our government has a complete disrespect, and actually, he wasn't voted in, and he's not an Indigenous Irish, like he's half Irish, but his total disrespect for the Irish, and he's hoping that he's delighted that there's more immigrants now, and we will be a minority. He's total disrespect. It's disgusting to see. So, I suppose the big things with people slightly kind of waking up, well, in this country, was the grooming gangs in your country have kind of frightened people, although the media's headed down. Was that did you see that, or was that something that you...
Well, yeah, I mean, when Tony Blair allowed people basically to claim asylum into this country on any grounds, and people in the third world realised that Britain had become the easy touch of the world and began to move into this country in a massive way. We had an asylum hostel opened basically at the end of the road, and they started to come in from all over the world, Somalis, Albanians.
And what was that, 20 years ago, was it?
Well, this was 20 years onwards, it was ongoing.
Because we have our Tony Blair now, which is Leo, which wasn't even voted in, but anyway. Yeah.
Well, I'll come back to that in a second, but what I saw was that these lads were poaching English girls. They were approaching them at bus stops. They were grabbing hold of them and so on. And if we tried to intervene, we were called racist, and the police would actually come and warn us off. So the police were protecting these people no matter what they did. Now, in 1997, when Blair got elected, in Ireland, there was maybe 4,000 or 5,000 Muslims, that's all.
Yeah.
I believe today in Ireland there are officially something like 80,000 Muslims, but there's probably over 100,000. So we're looking at an explosion in their population. What happened in the UK back in 1997 is happening to Ireland now.
Exactly, completely. And you can see it even with the disrespect of the so-called Taoiseach, who has no mandate to run this country because he wasn't actually voted in, nor was his party. But he's like that. He's saying there's every 1 in every 6 born is only Irish to a native Irish, that the others are to non-Irish, and it's fantastic because they pay taxes, unlike the Irish. It's absolutely, his racist comments towards the native Irish is disgusting. So this is what's happening now. And you can see, I mean, the Muslims have warned in Ireland, like we have the head of the Islamic fatwa in Dublin for the whole of Europe.
Yeah.
And you can see
Ireland now, like Britain was the soft touch in the 1990s under Blair, and is still in many ways a soft touch. Ireland is now viewed as the soft touch of Europe.
Completely.
So, I mean, you see, it's like a light, it's a beacon to all the Muslims who want to emigrate to the West, get to Ireland, because there's no resistance there. Now, your Taoiseach, or the Prime Minister, he may be, positive towards these people. He may be encouraging them, but there's no real voice standing against them. This is the problem.
Absolutely.
There's no counter
and
voice.
Particularly, you're lucky in one way because you have counter voices in your country. In my country, there is Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, Sinn Féin, they are all the same party. They're all EU unionists. They want this global agenda. They want the root of the Irish indigenous race. They want no race. They want everybody to be like one race bullshit kind of thought. It's quite scary what's happening, and there is nobody in this country in politics speaking out for the indigenous Irish, which 10,000.
Their goal is quite simply to dispossess us of what we have, our own countries. And I mean, it took the Irish a long time to get repossession of their own country.
800 years, yes.
Well, I mean, you know.
700 republic, but yeah, it's.
It took a long time, and they got to a degree, they got it back, but now they're just throwing it away. Now, the people in power now, the elite, they want to dispossess the Irish, as they do in Britain. They want to dispossess the British, and they want to replace us with these third world immigrants. Now, you explain that. What's the logic behind that? It's the globalist strategy to create a world of no nations, where everything is run by a global elite who are answerable to nobody, who do whatever they want, and there's nobody to call them to account. This is what nations are about. They're about calling the leaders to account. These people don't want any accountability. They want to do what they want. They want to be in complete control. And they realize they can have this if they have a docile third world population who basically are dependent upon them. And we, you see, the indigenous peoples of Europe, we will assert our rights. We know our rights. We know that liberty is part of this continent. We know that democracy is part of this continent. And the elite can't just walk over us. But we have to exercise those rights.
Absolutely.
We have to stand up.
And it's time, I think, for Ireland. Like, there's a few of us, like, thankfully, in your country, there's more of you guys who are awake. But in our country, there's a few of us who are awake. And there's a few of us willing to stand up at any cost and kind of wake the rest of them up. But
it is a cost.
Unfortunately, we're small at the moment. Hopefully, we will grow. But it's very, very scary that they've handed over everything and they've signed over a neutrality. So our children will have to fight a war that the EU says they have to go into, and which because of you guys and the Brexit, they're trying to cause friction to the two countries, to cause a war, because they think that way it'll put pressure on you to stay, which is, they don't care about who gets killed or what will happen in it. And they're hoping that the IRA start off again, because they think in their stupid little minds, or they don't really care what happens, they just want to put friction on Brexit. And
what they're doing, anyone who challenges their globalist agenda, which the EU is part of, is stigmatised. They're put down and insulted. And if they keep asserting themselves, it goes from being stigmatised to being criminalised. I mean, there've been a whole host of cases in the UK, you know, about Tommy Robinson, you know, about Britain First, of outspoken people being put in prison. So they're trying to, at every step, to thwart the democratic process, to thwart open debate and free speech. And that is what is really scary about this.
Yeah, they've new introduced 2 years for hate speech, which is complete bullshit. It's like hate speech, so it doesn't even mean anything. You can be hate speeching about a bloody chair. It depends on the person who perceives what hate speech is. It's such a bullshit subject. It's ridiculous.
Well, hate speech is basically truth speech. They hate the truth. They hate people who speak the truth. Now, we don't hate anybody as individuals. We hate what's going on.
Absolutely.
We don't hate any nation, any ethnicity, but there are ideologies that we don't like and we don't want imposed upon us. And when we have a shared Christian heritage, and we appreciate that, and we don't want an Islamic culture imposed upon us because it's so different. It's so different from what we used to.
Ideology,
women.
Horrific, absolutely. Female
mutilation,
second attack, child bride, the whole lot of it is absolutely evil. As far as I'm concerned, it's straight from the second devil. Muhammad was the devil himself. It's disgusting ideology, and anyone who thinks anything else should get their head fucking examined. It's disgusting. There's nothing good.
Well, the thing about Islam, it's existed for 1400 years. I mean, it's been there in Saudi Arabia, the Middle East, Turkey, whatever. Now, if they want to live that way, that's entirely their choice. But when I look at the way they live, the fact that there is no, diversity is the word. There's no room for plurality in their countries. You have to follow the Sharia. There's no room for equality women are basically
Gender
treated as
apartheid,
second-class citizens.
Absolutely.
And it goes beyond that. The way they treat the unbelievers, they're content for what they call a kafir, that you can rape them, that you can plunder them, that you can enslave them. I mean, it's just for us, it's unacceptable.
Sick.
Simple as that.
Sick ideology. Now, we were being told in Ireland, you guys have been lied, cheated to in Brexit. You didn't know what you were voted for. I've asked a few English people this, but I still have to ask because it's such a propaganda thing that Irish love to tell each other that the poor British didn't know what they were voting for, and that somehow you were lied to, and that you don't really understand what's going to happen.
Thank you very much for listening.
You are listening to Irish News Radio at irishnews.net. Email news@irishnews.net.